the e-book and him sitting there reading about machinery that's sort of long gone, whilst he's made out of all the debris that was my grandfather's off of his workbench. So you know, it meant something to me to use them and to continue, rather than waste the materials, you know, rather than throw them away, continue, you know, my grandfather's idea of recycling and using stuff. So that was the idea behind this.
So like, what sort of processes would you say you used, like to attach everything? Was it just like spot welded, or? Yeah,
initially it was spot welded and made a little bit more secure as I went along. You know, quite fiddly to sort of start. Quite often I start at the foot when I'm doing figures. I don't know why, but I start at the foot and just sort of build up from there, and it sets the scale as I go.
Oh, that's good.
You know, if you're open-minded to how big it ends up, starting at the bottom and working up works for me sometimes. I know it's peculiar.
So it's like with the differences in colour, are the black bits painted, or was that actually a wash?
Yeah. It's just to sort of give them some protection, really. The areas that you weld rust quicker, and if you don't seal it with something, you know, you start having bits snap and break over time. So a bit of paint helps to protect it.
But you left the face and the hand sort of separate to sort of like different between skin.
Yeah. I wanted some line between the flesh and the clothes.
I still love the fact that you've got like horseshoes and stuff, and it's just an interesting piece, because the more you look at it, the more you notice about it.
Yeah, it's like the first time I actually looked at it, I mean, we spent quite a long time looking at it, and I've only just realised the cog in his chest.
Yeah.
I love work that you notice something new every time you look at it.
Yeah,
like hinges down here.
There was all sorts, and a lot of it was just sort of rifling through boxes and boxes of tools just to find the right part. You know, needing something that was his sort of forearm, or you know, his thigh. You know,
was there sort of a process of that, or was it literally you just?
It was sorting right, and try it and see if it works. Weld it quick.
If it felt right, well.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Was this like obviously, did you just go straight into this, or did you have any sketches or anything? You just went
I went straight into this one. I didn't pre-sketch. I didn't. Sometimes I do. When we go back to mine, you'll see some of the maquettes that I've made. But no, with a piece like this, I guess it comes down to confidence. If I've done enough figures that I feel I can make a figure without needing to sort of. But some of the maquettes I've made recently are things I've never carved before. So I've just got a commission for carving a large grizzly bear sort of standing out of oak. So
oh, okay,
that sounds cool.
That'll be chainsaw carved.
That sounds awesome.
So I've made a small one just so I know where I'm going.
Yeah,
you know, shape and proportion.
So I really want to see that.
There's stuff like that sort of in the 60s and 70s, and he was quite into sort of insects and mechanical sort of crossovers from natural things turned mechanical.
Roger Dean, did you say? Yeah,
Roger Dean. Yeah.
So what was the inspiration behind this one?
Well, like I say, partly the image that I'd seen of Roger Dean's a painting. I'm not sure if it was one of his album covers, but I like the shape and the style of and I kind of found a piece this central piece here. I'm not sure what it comes off of, but I suspect it's a piece off of. I don't know whether it would have been a plough end from my grandfather's.
Does look like some sort of like sharpened
edge
or something like that. So
so you found that in amongst the stuff with the other tools?
That was the starting point. I sort of felt like I'd got the back end of this insect that I'd seen an image of.
Yeah.
And from there I kind of started looking for the other bits to sort of bring this 2D image into 3D.
Yeah.
So what about the legs then? Is that how were those constructed?
Again, they were found items, sorting through, finding whatever I could. There's some nails involved on some of the end sections, but I loved the sort of jointing.
How's it done? Did you like bend the materials, or were they like welded together?
I think with these I've actually welded them, probably because I was running out of the right size of materials. I'd got a sort of bolt, and then it was going down to something a bit thinner, and then thinner, and so it was, I would think, just dependent on what I had around.
Necessity means.
Yeah.
I do like the wings though, how because of the way they've sort of still got shine on the top, it definitely defines
it does
makes
lift
them stand out,
doesn't it? Yeah. And
stands out.
I'm guessing
actually.
They move as well as the mouth. That's brilliant.
Nice.
That's a nice touch. It's a really nice touch.
You would never notice that because no one normally is.
No.
Normally no one wants to touch these things.
No,
but
no, I kind of like people touching my sculptures, to be honest, for the most part. There are a few that are a bit more fragile that you kind of, ooh, I wish they wouldn't, you know, but for the most part, they're, I think it's a good thing touching them.
I'm curious, what are the eyes made out of?
They were some sort of connections. I think they came from here. I had, while I was doing some robot bits here, I had access to all sorts of conductors and weird things they had. A lot of the time they were putting them in a skip, and there'd be me sort of just poking my head out the skip. I've got to have that, and sort of throwing stuff in a box and keeping anything that I thought I could reuse.
That really does sound like my college days. Oh, boy.
I mean, I'm guessing. I mean, we've just started doing metal today properly, and we're using copper at the moment. But I'm guessing this was all. Do you do this on like an anvil or something and just shape it round it? Like, is it all hand?
You will see my facilities I've got. Some of them are a little limited. You know, I haven't got a full forge. You know, I've got some welding equipment. But because I like to work in so many different materials, I don't think I'm ever going to be fully equipped in everything.
Yeah, because so you sort of like get them the majority of all different things.
Yeah. I like sort of sometimes working, you know, in polystyrene and fiberglass in it, like the foot and the hand. And I like sort of playing around with metal, and I like occasionally getting calls from people saying, I've got I want a 9-foot Saxon prince carved, which is one I took over last week to Chelmsford.
Oh right, I remember.
From a tree a lot bigger than this. I mean, it was enormous, and carved a Saxon prince, and
oh, nice.
That's just always tell the grandkids.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shame we didn't come a week earlier. We could have got that one as well.
That would have been amazing.
So I'm curious on this hinge. Is it just like a standard hinge to start with, and then you attach all these bits to the outside, or did you like? You know, there's a leaf
that
in
does
the way.
look like a standard hinge under there that I've welded on these wing sections onto one side, and I've welded the other side to the jaw.
It's simple and effective, but it looks more complicated than it is.
Well, I mean, I never would have noticed that it moved. Do you know what I mean? Until you actually did it.
Because it does look like just one solid sort of piece. It's something that it looks very sturdy,
especially when you've got all the welding bits, and obviously naturally you think welding's going to be solid. I like it.
I know. This was me experimenting with texture.
Oh right.
I was wondering about that.
Or as other people would call it, a welder would call it. Somebody who professionally welds, they would call it bad welding. But if you give it that. They call it a bird shit effect.
Right.
If a welder sees that, what's all with all the bird shit all over it? You know, can't you weld? But I like that texture, and you'll see a number of pieces where I've done that.
Yeah, again, it very much brings, like you've done with the wings and the body, it brings a separation between the head and the rest of it.
Yeah, it feels like
it.
almost like a, you know, like a shell from like a crab or something, the carapace, where it's all like very rough and texture. And yeah, I mean, I naturally assumed that you would have put that in purposely, and obviously you have, rather than just finding it like that, because it does, like you say, it separates it from the rest of it, because all of these bits and pieces are all like nice and smooth, and then you've got that which is like the rough sort of.
The way it's sort of built, it's almost like there's three almost distinct parts. You've got the head, you've got the body, and you've got the wings, and you've obviously got the legs, so you've got like 4 completely distinct parts that almost all could potentially be completely different pieces themselves put together to create this object.
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, I've made a number of figures out of mesh. You know, sometimes they started out just as a way of advertising the art trail. I've made one with like a banner that he was holding up, and the banner was visit the art trail, you know, check out the sculptures, and people really liked them, so I started making a few more. I made one that used to sit here most years, that was salt now, but sort of cross-legged in a sort of meditation pose.
Okay.
And that worked really strikingly in mesh. You know, at their best they work really well. I'm not sure, you know, like I say, at times that one, I like that one sometimes, and at other times I find myself looking at it like I am at the moment and thinking, don't know why I bothered to bring that, not sure I even like it.
Yeah, so how was this all built? So did you create like a wire structure to begin with and then wrap the mesh around it? Or
it's called expanded mesh, and being galvanised you can, it's sort of punctured out of a flat sheet. And it means you can stretch it, which means you can sort of force areas out, and you can shape and mould it to an extent.
Okay.
And it's actually made for plasterers. You know, they would render over the top of that. It's the key, but to make things, it is very useful. I did make a few pieces like that I took to Glastonbury and other festivals years ago that were made like that and then covered with cut up CDs in a sort of mosaic fashion, and glued on with hot glue, and you can imagine how they caught the light, and with solar lights inside at night times they were sort of glowing blue or red.
Yeah,
and
sounds awesome.
They were really striking. They just didn't last, you know, so I've never sold any of those because I always felt they were pieces that were better for display, really. You would I was constantly having to maintain them and repair them, cutting out new bits of CD and sticking them on to get them ready for the next festival.
Okay.
And they were just too much to maintain to actually want to sell them to anybody. I didn't think it was fair.
I mean, like with the mesh sort of side of things on that one in particular, I can imagine once obviously you say it swivels, right? So once obviously the wind and stuff like catches it, when it turns, I should imagine the idea of the mesh, because of how it is, as it turns, it almost gives the scales effect from the fish, and I can imagine that would look really nice like on a gentle breeze or something as it's turning amongst the water.
Times when I've been here during the sculpture trail when the dappled light coming through the trees has been catching that, and there's been just enough wind that it's turning, and it kind of fits its name, airfish. It works, but it's the light that brings it to life, and at the moment it just looks flat to me.
Yeah. So is that something that you do with quite a bit? You work that you build it so it works with a particular kind of sort of environment and lighting.
Not intentionally. I mean, I think you strive to make them work in every light, but that particular piece just doesn't. I don't think it works better. Like I say, nice sunlight, dappled light does sort of come to life. So I used it, and initially I didn't have them hard coated. They were, I kind of made my own hard coating up because it cost me about 400 quid for a piece like that to get it hard coated.
Bloody hell.
So
there goes most of the money.
Yeah. So recently, well, last winter. I fiberglassed this and the hands, and then repainted them to look like stone.
So how did you get the sort of painted stone effect? What kind of paints did you use?
They are masonry paints, just bought from a builder's merchant, but they were flicked with. I've got a dustpan brush, and I got covered. And I'm holding the handle, and I've got a ruler, and I'm just going like that, or with hands most of the time, just running it, so it flicks the paint. And I kept flicking reds, blues, greens, and just going over and over and over it till eventually it kind of got somewhere approaching. There was a misting of spray paint from cans as well, and
because you can see like at the bottom you've got more of a reddy hue and the sort of green bit, but then the outside definitely sort of looks like carved stone, and the inside does look like something you'd see like a piece of like broken, I wouldn't say granite, but some sort of hard stone. So it definitely, you did well on getting the effect of stone. It doesn't look stone. When I first saw it, I did think it was stone.
I have had a couple of people sort of say, how on earth do you move that?
That's
pick it up the front of my shoulder and go like this.
Bloody Superman.
So that's just
was this
polystyrene that was left over from the.
So was this sort of preconceived, or was it sort of again like the insect where you sort of just?
I think I carved a small version of that. They're one of those things you kind of want to get them right. If they're not, you can sort of definitely see. But
hands and feet are definitely.
Yeah, and I do feel that possibly lost a little bit in the fiberglass from what it was. But it was important to make it last rather than degrade. I had it exhibited at Chelmsford last year before I fiberglassed it. Like I say, it got my own version of a hard coat. It just wasn't that hard. It was a sort of varnish and various other things all mixed together. But people were coming up to it and picking it to see what it was made out of. Just out of interest, they just had to break a little piece off to see. So, and there was a big sign saying, "Don't, please don't let your children climb on this." And children were jumping on it and sitting on it and going, "Mummy, mummy, look at me!" So it came back looking pretty knocked about. So I knew I'd got to either throw it away or fiberglass it. So that was the moment that I decided.
I can imagine that would be a mixture of annoying. I would actually see that kind of interesting in a way, the fact that people are so almost the illusion that it is stone is so great that you're done with it, that people don't actually know whether it's stone or not. Because again, as I said, when I first came here, I did think that was just like a massive carved stone, single stone piece. I'm just like, yeah, how was this taken in? And it's just like, it's like you tell me this and now, it's just like I'm disillusioned, but it's in a good way because it just makes me appreciate more about the effort you put into getting it to look like stone.
And the fact that you can create something so realistic out of something that's softer than, like a completely different material, but yet you can make it look like something else.
Complete departure from the original material.
I mean, I've got some a friend who works for his father, and his father's company is called Big Stuff, and they make advertising and bits for the theatre, bits for films, bits for all sorts of different things. And they work with polystyrene because obviously it's a cheap material to make large things out of,
cheap and
their bits turn up in all sorts of things, and on occasion I've gone and helped and worked with them, so I kind of had an interest in the material anyway.
It's completely
they really
freestanding.
They do look like they should fall off at any second.
So how hard was it to get the proper balance right for this?
I've made a few now, so I've kind of they were like that with the balance point in the centre, and they're kind of loosely based on a Victorian toy you could get, like a strongman. And yeah, just weight on one end, man on the other, or in the middle, I think. I can't remember how they did it, but weights at either end. I think there was weights at either end on that one, with the strong man in the middle as the pivot point.
Oh, right.
But I kind of took that and run with it really, and tried to find out what else would work. And it's again, it's the balance, subtly the differences between the male and the female form. When you're not putting any detail in, to me that still looks feminine and that still looks masculine. So I was sort of seeing how little detail I could put in that still suggest male and female.
Because I see that the male figure here is very simple back figure over there. So were these sort of like in the same sort of group?
They were made over the same sort of period. Yeah, I was quite into sort of doing the sort of movement lines on the hair. It wasn't necessarily depicting my long hair, as I think, you know. But no, to me it was like the movement of the head, you know, the way the camera, you know, and you can leave a sort of trace when you're on slow exposure.
Oh yeah.
I kind of liked that sort of.
So, is this completely? I mean, it's not actually attached to the pivot point, is it? It just sits on top.
Just sits on top completely. Yeah.
So what was it? Because you said you're very much kind of found material. So was this found materials as well? Or was
This is nails and a few rods that were made from a stairgate.
Nice.
A kiddie stairgate. My children didn't need them anymore, so I immediately started stripping the rubber off and cutting the metal. And this was part of an old lamp stand that somebody gave me. It sort of curled and twisted like that already, and I've just kind of gone from there. And some of this was added because this material was quite thin, and the weight of that was making the whole thing sag a bit. So I sort of added some more flourishes to support it.
So it added to the design.
Yeah.
So it's just completely free balancing.
Yep.
I don't want to move it too much in case I drop it.
It doesn't matter if it falls off.
You can see that the actual balance point is actually just a bent screw.
Yeah.
Which is that's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm really liking that. Again, your work seems to mostly be sort of found in recycled materials. It's really cool.
I like the fact that it's also like an interactive piece in a way that's similar to the insect. Like the fact that if you were to sort of, you know, when I saw it earlier, I thought it was all one piece. I didn't realise that it moved. And stuff.
No, I think probably a lot of people don't realise that. I'd have liked to have had it where people could walk and knock into it and discover that, but unfortunately, if somebody came up and gave that, you know, they could probably knock it off, and if it fell off and hit a little child, which is why I've got it back, you know, and I'm kind of relying on the wind to move it so people can see it moving rather than.
Okay.
But
how heavy is it? Because essentially,
it's fairly heavy. Lift it off if you like.
I'm not going to do that, but I'm just saying because you say catching the wind. Again, I'm guessing you had to take some weight into sort of, in mind when you were designing this, so one, it didn't just bend, as you said, you created this whole structure.
I had been thinking of making one that like holding a little, so that it catches the wind, you know, little paddle or something, that, you know, so that it'll actually catch the wind, so it'll move more. But
so is that something you're thinking of doing like next, or possibly coming up? Yeah,
it's a piece I'm thinking about. Although I was thinking of a roundabout version.
Oh right, yeah.
So that it could be lower to the ground, and even if somebody did knock it off of its pivot point, it's not going to fall and hurt somebody. So I was going to make a sort of round one with sort of 4 balanced figures, with a couple of them holding bits that would catch the wind. So it should just keep turning it into the wind.
Brilliant.
That was the theory. But,
really cool.
That sounds good.
Onto your totem then.
Yeah, onto the totem.
Sean's favourite piece.
No, my favourite piece is still the guy, but the totem is a close second.
The totem, what you know, tread on the flowers, because I don't know if the volunteers were here earlier. They were standing here, and if they catch you walking on the flowers, you'll get told. But the beak of the bird, same as the ones over there. They're from they're from bits from my grandfather's, and they're something to do with a grass cutter.
Oh, right.
They're the bits that hold the bit where the blade goes and goes backwards and forwards. There's a slot in them, and that would have held the blade, and you know that would have held the pieces where it cuts the grass. Where the
Okay.
so I had quite a few of those. So as soon as you pick one of them up, they're instantly a bird beak, which is why I started making birds.
Yeah.
I call them bamlets because most of them have got a big stamps. The name of the company that made the grass cutter must have been Bamlet. But it sounds like such a bird name, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
So I've called them greater crested bamlets. I've called them, you know, lesser crested. And didn't lose that. That's my key to my car.
Whoop.
You know, and I think one of them over there is Kung Fu Bamlet. He's
I saw that.
Oh god, it's like so yeah, with the rest of it then, because you got your Bamlet, and
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
So what was the inspiration behind the sort of red angry face?
The angry face is actually the top of an air conditioning unit.
Right.
That's been cut. The ring is another agricultural piece. Not exactly sure what it went to, but and there's a bit of bed in there. The framing is from an old bed that was sort of cut back to that makes the framing that the whole thing sits on.
Oh yeah.
So, but I'd carved a few totems over at Highlands Park.
Oh yeah.
In Chelmsford, and I just sort of fancied doing a metal version.
So like, is there obviously, like, is there any meanings between each individual one, or is it just like the whole thing is, like, because obviously you've got the Bamlet, and is there like, does the yellow part mean completely different to like what the red bit is, or are they sort of like stacked like?
Well, it's a small reference, the yellow ring and the face under the bird to the sort of Aztec-y sun gods.
I was getting that. I was getting that.
It was,
and then the red face was I was getting the sort of tribal thing from the red face.
Yeah. It was just an amalgam of different sort of totem elements, really, that I kind of put together in hopefully a pleasing and interesting way.
Yeah, also the way it's been placed, because it almost does give off either the idea that the red angry face is like something jumping out the bushes, or you can also think of it as a way as like discovering a like ancient totem from a ancient civilization in the bushes in some forest somewhere.
Yeah,
exactly. So for kids, I imagine would be quite a interesting thing to sort of look at.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any mad sort of need for every piece to have huge meaning behind it. You can make bits because
you just want to.
They're fun, and you fancy doing it, you know, and you know, there's something that grabs you and you just want to go with it, and I think bits that youngsters like and engage with in some way, if it draws them into art and gives them a bit of interest, you know, can't be a bad thing.
Yeah.
I certainly do think it would be very striking for children, because it's striking to me because it is just a very interesting sort of form. You got, because the way it sort of one stands on its own, and you've got all these sort of like bits coming out of it, and this very sort of defined face, in fact 2 faces, and the fact that you've also incorporated sort of the form of your banner from other things you've done before, so it not only speaks of your work but also sort of just has this very captivating sort of look at just.
I know with the bird. I mean, a lot of the totems you get, the sort of traditional Indian ones, have got birds on top, haven't they?
Yeah.
You know, wings spread.
The eagles.
You know, that was part of it.
So, I mean, by the looks of it, like each segment in a way is taken from a different form of totem. In a way, like inspiration. Like obviously the bottom one I'd say looked a little bit more.
What you're getting at
tribal.
is I winged it.
Hey, don't but you don't tell anyone else there.
Yeah, don't say that.
You're gonna sound
Yeah, I
smart,
winged it, yeah. Yeah, no, it is just a sort of fun piece I put together. I mean, some of the bits were made originally for to take in as site decoration for festivals, so that I could get into Glastonbury for nothing.
Oh well, every job has its perks.
You know, got to be done. So it was just about making something bold and bright that would get me free tickets to Glastonbury. You know? So we did that for a few years. And
whatever the reason, you still made some interesting pieces. Yeah. So it doesn't mean it matters why.
At least it's got a story to tell.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because you're getting the Glastonbury free, so there's no complaining.
Yeah, you got to Glastonbury before I did.
He's made out of old electric boxes, you know, circuit breakers, connection boxes, and they were parts that I got from the museum, from their skip diving.
Great way to spend your time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
It's amazing what you find in them.
But I made a number of them for them, which are inside the museum. The rest of them. I don't know if they've got 6 or 7, and they're after 10. They want 10 robots.
Well, robots always grab the kids.
Well, absolutely, and they've got little sort of colouring sheets they've done based on them, and little quizzy things that, you know, and it fits the theme of the museum. You know, the sort of robots here.
Yeah.
I still love the fact that, you know, you had this very sort of utilitarian metal structure that's just holding like a stick, like a little plough. It's just a he's a gardening robot, and I don't know if it's still in there, but at one point, there's the door. He does open. He's resisting.
He is, isn't he? Goodness. I'm going to break him if he don't seem to want to come open. He's obviously rusted shut at the moment. But there was a little note inside that just said, "Rake leaves." So if anybody opened it and sort of looked at it, it just said, "Rake leaves."
Aaron, a little bit of a secret there. Again, you seem to, like you said, you want people to sort of walk up to your work and touch it and sort of interact with it.
Yeah,
it's
it
cool.
makes it, I think, a lot more, especially for like younger people and kids and stuff, to be interactive with the art and stuff. You know, I remember as I was a kid walking around looking at art, and I was like, so. But now, you know, like growing up, obviously that's changed. But as a kid, if the artwork was interactive, it just grips you more. So no, it's nice that you put like all of the sort of interactive elements, even though it's not like posterized that it's interactive. It's a case of, you know, you'd find out if you touched it.
Exactly. It's sort of like it's up to the person to discover that for themselves, which is even better for kids, because kids are curious enough.
I think sometimes if you put a big sign on it saying, "Yeah, jump all over it, do what you like."
Then no one does.
No, partly I think if somebody did and hurt themselves, being stupid and reckless, it would then be my fault. So I don't put anything. But if they do, that's fine. That's the how I approach it.
I mean, I can imagine certain things like, like for instance on the insects, where if, you know, a family comes along or whatnot, and like obviously the family like don't touch anything, and the kid runs up and touches it anyway, you know, it's kind of surprising that it's actually the kid that finds out about things that the parents didn't know. You know, they're essentially the discoverers of what some of your artwork does. And I think that's quite an interesting idea, the fact that sometimes it's kids that discover more.
with children, so you know, I quite like working with youngsters.
Like kids.
I used to try out all my workshops on my children and their friends, and then, you know, I'd go and do them where I'm getting paid for them, and with a group, you know, I'd test them on my kids first.
Yeah,
it's always a good idea to test them.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody's got to be a guinea pig. But my children kind of grew up with that and took it for granted, and didn't have a huge appreciation for it, but their friends would come round and go, "Oh, you know, we're doing carving, great." You know, breeze block carving is still a workshop I do now with youngsters. soaked bits of the white breeze block with blunt tools. You can get some incredibly good effects with them. A piece of pipe with an angle cut makes like a good gouge chisel.
Oh, okay.
But it's not sharp, but it's on breeze block.
Yeah.
You can bore a hole with it, you can scrape with it, you can cut lines and make folds and rolls.
So for a kid, that
You know,
would be...
with just one tool will do that. And then a little blunt hacksaw blade with a handle, blade not sticking out too much. You can mark eyes. You know, you can do those little details, make fingers.
Yeah.
You know, it's a popular workshop, and I've done it so many times now over the years, and it's just always popular. It's always, there's always a crowd around me when I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And kids sort of queuing up patiently, waiting for their turn to have a go. And
I guess it's quite a good thing, like you say, using like not going out and buying expensive tools, but just using something that you can find anywhere, or in like a skip or something, or even just going down to like a home base or whatever, just getting the offcuts or something like that, and then essentially it costs the parents nothing, but the kids get, you know, a good feel for the art out of it. That sounds like, you know,
I have had
pretty good workshops.
I had one parent ring me just before Christmas last year. Their child had done one of my workshops, and all they kept going on about wanting for Christmas was the tool set to carve breeze blocks and some breeze block.
Okay.
So she ended up contacting me before Christmas to say, can I buy a little kit off you? And I'd never thought about putting a kit together. In fact, I think I put the kit together and gave it to them, you know, because I hadn't ever thought of putting it into a kit. But you know, they're over the moon with it, and I just thought, there's a little sculptor in the making, you know, if he was that keen.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids are always good with that sort of, they like learning new things and experiencing new things, and giving kids a chance to, you know, try these things that they would never normally be allowed to do.
Especially seeing as kids are mostly kinetic, like their learning styles. I mean, I'm still kinetic now.
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you
Yeah,
said
this was a windowsill that came out of a Victorian house, and I've sort of relief carved it. It was one of my earlier sort of stone pieces, and it's kind of one of my favourites. My children were quite young when I made that, and they're in their 20s now. Well, one of them is.
It's got a long history of them.
Yeah, so I've sort of kept that bit with me, and it's been to lots of things like this. I actually forgot that one last year. I left it here, and it's been sitting there since last year's art trail, and it wasn't until I came to this year's art trail that I went, that's mine, what's that still doing there? So I put a price on it and a thing, and when I clean up after the obviously that one will be going with me, even though it stayed here all last year. But,
so what was the inspiration behind it?
it was family. It was that whole idea of you know, new children, new life, and you know, holding them up, showing them to the universe. You know. Yeah.
So are the figures particular, was that meant to represent like you and your kids, or was it just a general
it wasn't
sort of
meant to represent me or even a male. You know, it was just a figure holding a child. It was just about birth and rebirth, really.
Oh, okay.
Fair enough.
So it sounds like a silly question, but what did you carve it out of? Because I mean, I do little bits of relief carving, but to be honest with you, mine kind of suck.
Don't tell me that.
So
that was carved. I use a thing called a scutch hammer for quite a lot, and it's actually a tool that bricklayers use.
Right.
And you can replace the teeth. You can knock the teeth out and slot a new set of teeth in and start carving again.
Oh, okay.
And like I say, it's a thing that bricklayers use. My father was a builder, so you know, I inherited some of his tools, and but I'd already sort of had the the confidence to use them, because I'd worked with him on and off over the years. So that was a combination of the Scotch hammer and an angle grinder, if I remember rightly. Just I chalked on the outline and sort of made the cuts and then chiselled back towards it with the Scotch hammer.
Oh, okay.
And by making the cut, it protects the sort of areas you don't want to take away.
Yeah.
And this texture is made by the Scotch hammer, the teeth of the...
Oh, right, yeah. All of the little things that look like, almost like rays.
But it's a sort of sandstone, so to sort of flat areas off, you can sort of use sandpapers, and you know it isn't as hard as you imagine. A lot of people assume stone is as hard as rock, but it's not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No.
Well, it depends how hard the rock is.
True. Well, you wouldn't be able to do that with a piece of granite. I can do that much, but with sandstone, yeah.
I have got a piece of granite at home that I've carved.
Really?
That used to be a piece of Malden curbstone.
Oh, right,
The
yeah.
curbstones are always made out of granite. And normally you don't get a chance to get hold of them, but I managed to get hold of a number of them, and I've only carved one because it is pretty hard to carve.
Granite is like...
I wasn't sure which was wearing down first, me or the stone. I gave up when I got to a point. I thought, right, it's done.
Because where I come from, because I come from a place called Guernsey, it's a place well known for granite quarries.
Oh yes, yeah, for the curling, they make the curling stones from there, don't they?
And I got a chance to actually sort of do a bit of granite carving, and I had previously sort of experienced stone carving with sandstone before, but there is such a big difference between the two materials. It's just like sandstone, okay, it's a reasonably hard stone, but you can get through it. And it's more like, okay,
Nothing's happening.
yeah, we're there for like 3 hours and just like, okay, I'm finally done with one line and back to the other one. It's just like, so it's a very different experience between the two materials.
Yeah.
So, obviously you say at the end of the trail you're taking this piece back, yeah? Are you gonna, obviously where it's been here like for the past year, it's got like the green weathering and stuff on it. Are you gonna keep it like at natural, or are you gonna...
Like that. I'd rather like that. I've left it on the kiss. I did clean the kiss once and decided it was a mistake, and I've never cleaned it since. I like it with the moss growing.
Okay.
It does probably mean that it won't sell, in all honesty, because something I've discovered with wood carvings, when they're shiny and new, people will buy them. But as soon as they start to weather, people look at them and go, oh yeah, it's lovely, it's lovely. Yeah, I'm not going to buy that. You know, and they won't buy them if they've got any weathering on them.
Well, that's the thing people
and I like the weathering. I like that sort of...
It gives it a nice age.
That silvering of
Yeah.
the oak.
Because people, for some reason, really just love brand new things, even though, frankly, I don't know what it looked like when it was freshly carved. I do just like it now because it has this sort of character and history to it, because you see that, well, it's been here long. It looks, because of how old it feels like it's been there a long time. So it sort of gives it this sort of history and character.
Yeah, almost like it's... Well, I know you do quite a lot of work with nature, don't you? So it's almost like nature's reclaiming stone, almost. So it adds, in a way, like parts to it which obviously were never intended when you first created it, but they just add to the overall effect, I think, like the aesthetics. So, I mean, I think I'd have to agree with you. I think, you know, taking off the green would sort of be a mistake in a lot of things.
So it's sort of taking away a piece of what it's become.
Yeah.
It's sort of an evolution of the piece.
Yeah. I think it's nice for them to go on changing, and you know, it's just part of them. I think we'd.
Here comes the name round.
Yeah, I think it is good, isn't it?
Right, well, I'll stop there.
Which means the figures have kind of all leaned in towards each other, and they're a bit cramped up here where they shouldn't be. So I'm trying to get it to flatten back out now. I've brought it in from the damp, and hopefully it'll level out a bit more. But it's sort of supposed to be a sort of joyous celebration of people sort of dancing.
Got a drummer in there.
Yeah.
Inspired by Glastonbury much?
It wasn't actually.
Oh,
no,
no?
you'd think so. No, it was actually the chap who it's for is it was an African.
Oh, okay.
An image that he'd got, a poster of these sort of very stylised, crudely drawn people, all sort of dancing round a fire, you know, very sort of tribal looking.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a
okay.
cave painting tribal type.
Yeah, and he commissioned me to do that. But as you can see, I'm very messy at the
So
moment.
this,
I've been carving with wood in here, so it ends up like this. And then I start welding, and then I catch fire to things, and I have to have a fire extinguisher nearby.
Oh boy.
Or I have to stop and clean up properly and to transition from wood to metal. But
so this is where all the magic happens.
this is all the madness.
This is where the magic happens.
Yeah. When my kids were young, I made these sort of based on their faces, and they're very fine brass mesh, and
It's almost ghostly in a way.
they do have
from
that
here.
sort of ghostly effect, but
Yeah.
the shadows they cast are fantastic.
Oh, really?
They are like 3D graphic drawings
Wow.
because you get the lines of
Yeah.
and it like they're mapping lines because they obviously follow the contours of the face, and the shadow does the same.
I'm gonna have to
And,
try giving a.
But I've never
version
managed
of
to
it.
find a good way of exhibiting them, because they need a sort of darkened space, slightly darkened space. They need a spotlight that's the right type of spotlight that only has one light source, because if it has multiple, like LEDs, you end up with multiple shadows and it breaks. So it needs to be the right, you know, everything. And when I've had it right, and I've got one framed, it's got a frame round it, I kind of think they're one of the best things I've ever made. When I have the light shining through it, and it's suddenly you've got an image that's this big,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like I say, like a graphic sort of mapping of a face. I've just never managed to find a really good way of doing that in a gallery space.
No, that sounds really good, actually.
If you ever do manage to figure that out, I really want to go see it.
So these bits that you've done before, these things.
Yeah. Again, in the spirit of keeping. This isn't mine actually. This is my nephew's. I was saying about. He's very into the aluminium. He was making these. He made a Hussein bolt like that, life size. Well, bigger than life size, doing the pose and everything, and just pop riveted strips of aluminium, and incredibly striking effect it made. But this is from various bits that I've kind of stuck together, and I've also got. I love the idea that this is all wood. This came out of one of these pianos that play themselves.
Oh, right, yeah.
And this would have been the bits that worked the air. But this is a project waiting to happen. This will be something one day.
You just haven't figured out
I
what
just
yet.
haven't figured out what yet. And somewhere I've got a beautiful old gramophone motor.
Really?
You know, the old
yeah.
gramophones, and they're very powerful. You know, for what they are, you wind them up, and part of me's thinking something, you know, air comes out of there. Could I have a little figure that gets blown up? I've come up with a number of different scenarios
you've
so
got
I could use it.
Spitballing that.
Yeah,
There's a good thing is if you've got something that works, you can work from it.
yeah,
I think that's a good starting point, to have something that's already there that you can then add to or break down to add more to.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of into the engineering, but I'm not a very good engineer. You know, I've attempted several like that aviator, and with mixed success. I've got one out there that's sort of a helicopter, and I think the legs are hanging where they should be on the pedals, but every time the wind blows, I just haven't quite got it, got the balance right. But I've made a few attempts. Recognise that?
Ah, that was that the maquette for the
Yeah.
for the foot.
That was the start of the foot.
Now I can tell the
But,
story.
yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing though, because I mean, you look at this. I mean, even in this video, you can clearly see it's polystyrene. But then, if I was to sort of stop this video and open up the one that I've already made of the actual foot, you could not tell. You would not guess they're the same materials.
No, it's an incredibly interesting material to work with. It does wear out power tools though.
I can imagine.
You wouldn't think so, but it being such a soft material, but the dust from it, if you use
It's stuck in everything.
on one of these things, it does. The dust gets in the motors and burns everything out and ruins everything. I destroyed about two Dremels. One of them just doing one thing before I realised what was happening. Thought, right, stop using the power tools. But it's lovely because you can sort of get into a sweep and you can you can get finishes and it happens really quickly, which I quite like.
Funny you should say about the Dremel. I'm in the middle of carving a piece at the moment. Like, one of my favourite artists is Geiger. And I decided trying to make.
What's not to like about Geiger?
Exactly right. And I chose a couple of his works and sort of merged them together. I made a plaster tile. Well, I say a tile, it's about a good couple of inches thick. And I'm trying to do it all 3D, like relief carving. But my Dremel is not liking it because I've just been using Dremel for the entire thing, because it's, you know yourself, Geiger's work is extremely intricate. So, and I'm working from an airbrush painting and trying to make it 3D in carving, and it's just not liking it. But I'll get there one day.
One day.
I just remembered me telling you about the inspiration for that.
Oh, sorry.
For that, if I've got it, for the insect.
Oh yes.
Did I say Roger Dean? I'm sure it's this book. No, it's Rodney Matthews. I said Roger Dean, didn't I? I think it's this. I think you'll see what I mean about some of the sort of insecty type things,
sort of shapes
that,
and stuff.
That kind of grabbed me. I'm sure.
Well, now I recognise some of this stuff. I got my dad that has some of these albums.
Yeah, I sort of some of these, and but yeah, there was a. I was looking for one image in particular that was the one that kind of made me think of that insect. It's not those, but yeah, they did a lot of album covers back in the day. These
Very
could have been. Some of these were kind of similar, although they're dragons, aren't they? No, not. I haven't got my glasses. I do need glasses these days, I'm afraid.
No.
But no, I can't find it. But I'm sure it's this book that the actual image came from. Now we're getting into more insects, sort of band playing insects. But yeah,
Interesting show. They probably eat it after they're done. What's the book called?
It's well looked after, as you can see. The Last Ship Home, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rodney Matthews.
Rodney Matthews.
Yeah, I think.
Let's see if we can get it out in the library. At uni.
We can do some more in-depth analysis.
But
this is a familiar site.
I don't know where this one's going though. But you can sort of see the processes that.
Is this the one that it was just like the straight slice and?
This another, it's another slice. It's just this one I haven't quite resolved to my satisfaction. I'm not sure about some of the, I don't know. It just doesn't have the same flow as the others. But you know, there's a number of pieces in here that have ended up sort of either dead end pieces or you know,
I suppose that's sort of part
it
of
happens. It does happen. I mean, that's a bit of a dead end. That face all made out of nails, weighs a ton.
I can.
Weighs a ton.
They're all made out of like iron steel nails.
Is that a? Are there people on it?
Yeah.
They look,
yeah.
look like there's people.
They're not actually
Oh, okay.
fixed. They're just me, sort of
Playing
odds and
around.
ends of figures that I've started making for different things.
Superman.
I was saying about the roundabout idea.
Yeah.
That was sort of loosely speaking going to be.
Oh, right.
You see,
Okay.
that'll pivot, and then I can have
Everyone
figures as long as
Okay.
they're balanced, and it should work. That's the idea. But it may also catch the wind and be safer to have around young people.
So less likely to, you know, fall over and hit someone.
Sort of like an inverted spinning top in a way.
But it's using exactly the same idea as the balancing things, and so is this. Believe it or not, that
Dragonfly.
Like dragonfly.
Nail, actually. Oh, there we go. But basically, these sit on a stand, and they'll wibble about all over the place, and generally not fall off.
So is there like a specific method you have to do to make sure you get the balance right, or do you just play around with it until you can figure out the balance right and then like make
I'm
them
not a
up?
great engineer, so it isn't.
He just does it.
People assume I sit down and work out the maths behind it, but generally speaking, it's me going, "Does that work?"
Oh,
Look, there's the point. and you know, just finding the point where it sits right and looks okay, and
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, I made and sold quite a few of these. They were, you know,
I can
quite
see why. It's
popular,
a
you
simple
know.
thing,
I
but
was
Yeah,
gonna
it
say,
looks
I'm pretty
good.
sure I've seen, if not some of yours around, but something extremely
similar.
similar. So I've seen, they're very. I mean, they could well have been like yours or
Yeah,
something, but I've
quite
seen
possibly.
I've seen stuff that
I've sold enough of
resemble
these.
exactly
It's
like
quite
it.
possible you've seen one of mine. Yeah, yeah. But like I say, that was kind of what started the obsession. You know, coming up with the, sort of things like this, the whole balancing, and you know, it's sort of you expand the idea and you go off and
Try something
explore
new.
and you know try and find every way you can exploit a good idea, because good ideas aren't easy to come by. You know, they take time, and I always think they're a bit like your imagination's like a muscle. You have to sort of flex it and use it.
Yeah.
You know, and the more you flex it and use it, the more these ideas develop and
Come natural.
yeah.
So, I mean, like, I remember you saying earlier on about your other balancing pieces where you did the lines on the back of the head for the movement and stuff. I'm guessing with things like such as the dragonfly and the balance in general, it sort of helps with the whole, because you can actually physically see and capture the movement, especially if you've got the movement lines. Whereas if you do the movement lines on a drawing, it's not necessarily captured as movement lines.
Yeah.
But then when you've got the balancing thing in front of you and you can see it moving in the wind or whatever, you can see them clearly as movement lines. It makes quite an interesting concept.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. But yeah, like I say, there's I definitely need to tidy up in here. It sort of gets like this, and I get to the point where I can't work in here, and I have to have a major clear out, and I get the floor completely clear.
Then just get messy again.
Yeah, it don't take long. I was hoping I was going to be able to show you a bit of that U, but it's behind there, and it's really dark round there. And but the colours in it are just fabulous. You wouldn't. They're like your shoelaces almost. You know. Just flame red coming out of the timber. But I say they kind of almost demand an abstract piece rather than a figurative piece.
Understanding the material.
I have to ask you about that piece because it looks quite interesting. I'm quite a horror fan and stuff, and it looks almost like something you'd see on a horror thing. Like I don't know if it is from this angle, but it looks kind of like a screaming face with
Something like out of Evil Dead.
it's sort of like a Mardi Gras mask that's been. Oh, it's actually not wanting to come down. I was going to get it down, but it's sort of hooked. Other bits have been hooked over it since it was put up there. But,
That's okay.
I mean, there's hands in there, and I did a series of pieces. I was saying about Mark's Hall, the farm.
Yeah.
I sold some pieces there to a guy who buys work of young artists. That's how long ago it was. And obviously speculating whether he'll make money on them later on, and he come and bought some of my work, and I was quite flattered. But the piece I made was called 20th Century Syndrome, and I've since made 21st Century Syndrome because I could. But they were all pieces that were either people hiding behind a mask, or they were hands in front of a face. Some of them have been a mask in front of hands, sort of more like that.
Yeah.
I've made them out of wood, metal, and resin. And
So it's sort of a series that you do quite regularly.
yeah, and it is sort of just coming out of you know, the century we live in is incredibly bureaucratic, and you know, there's stuff you've got to do, things you've got to pay.
A lot of red tape.
You know, part of me thinks, you know, I was born in the wrong century. I should have, you know, would have been much better being around, you know, 100 years ago, and I wouldn't have to deal with all that nonsense.
Yeah.
So it was just frustration.
Oh, the healthcare's nice.
Yeah, I suppose there's that. Yeah.
So,
But it was just frustration with the 20th century. So it's 20th century syndrome.
yeah. Oh, it makes a lot of sense. When you do your face, I have to ask because I do a lot of portrait stuff, don't I? When you do your faces, like if you're to say, for instance, the masks or whatever, do you just sort of go off of your head, or do you actually sort of mold them around your face first and then interpret them afterwards, or is there any particular way that you go around building a face to look realistic as a face, or do you just sort of sit there and push and prod until it's in as you want it to?
I suppose even though I didn't ever exhibit me paintings, I've been learning and drawing the face for you know, ever really. And you know, you get to learn, you know, certain parts that just tend to sort of, you know, match on a face.
Yeah.
You know, and the proportions. And you know, it's been about that, and I have gradually got better at creating a carved face that doesn't have that sort of slightly comic look. You know, it's easy to do a face that kind of, it's instantly recognisable as a face, but it's
stylized.
That's what I used to call it when I couldn't do one that looked the way I wanted. I used to go, no, it's stylized. But you know, I've got better at you know, if I need to nail a face, and I still haven't done any real portrait sculpture, and part of me thinks that's probably the way I will go at some point. Have a go at you know, maybe I've done a few self-portraits in paint, so maybe I'll do one in sculpture and see what happens.
What, so sort of like a relief thing, or
well, no, possibly go
just
full 3D.
full 3D?
Yeah. I'm sorry to hurry you guys.
No,
I
that's
just
not a
checked the
problem.
time.
Yes,
and
So as you were saying, sort of like Anthony Gormley and sort of that sort of inspired your work, and
yeah, it's just the way they work with the human form, and you know, they're totally different approaches, but they both inspire me. I like the way Henry Moore used to sort of pick up flints. You know, you get those sort of bizarre shaped flints that you can find on the beach, or sometimes in the sandpits, or well, you find these, but they often, you put two together and they're a reclining figure. You know, and that's was often the starting point with his work. And Anthony Gormley's from a completely different approach, but equally I love the way he approaches his work. Just draw a lot of inspiration from the two of them.
Yeah. Right. Is there anything you want to ask, Sean?
Sorry?
Your turn to ask a question.
I'm taking it in.
I know you're taking it, but come on, it's your turn to ask a question, man. Come on.
My head works slower.
Come on, you got all day.
be nice.
I'm
to,
saving my
but-
questions for the carving, man.
Mm.
I'm looking forward to seeing your carving.
Yeah, I'm going to go and grab you a picture.
Okay.
I can